Okay. Hi. Look, I know it's been a while since I've uploaded like anything at all. Completely my fault. Haven't felt like really uploading anything. Also, I let my video editing software license expire and I haven't renewed it yet, and I don't plan on renewing it for a while. It's part of the other reason why I haven't uploaded. But this is something that I think that needs to be shared, and you're gonna have a shit ton of people in the emulation community share about this, make videos about this, but I felt like it would be nice to also put my voice out there because emulation is something that I deeply care about and that I've been doing since like uh, fucking since middle school. Um, Emulation is very important to me. I use it to play a lot of games that I either just don't have access to anymore, or games that I just have never gotten to play, and they either haven't ever been re-released or they have been re-released, but re-released for $40 to $60 Nintendo, which is the topic of this video. Two really big emulators have been shut down, those being Yuzu and Citra. Yuzu being one of the most popular emulators, mostly just because it's a Switch emulator, but it's also the more popular Switch emulator. And Citra being, I could be wrong on this, but I think being really the only 3DS emulator, or at least the biggest one. I have not seen any other 3DS emulator other than Citra. Then again, I haven't really looked into it because Citra is just one of those, really good quality emulators for 3DS games. But yeah, so Nintendo essentially sent a lawsuit to the developers of Yuzu, telling them to take their fucking shit down, blah, 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 right? Nintendo being Nintendo, as people like to say. And Yuzu made a deal with Nintendo to pay like a sum of $2 million to Nintendo. On top of that, they have to send over everything they have worked on Yuzu related. And I believe Citra. I think the developers that made Yuzu are the same ones that made Citra. I could be wrong, but we'll get more into that. But yeah, so they did send all their source code, just everything to Nintendo and shut everything down. Now, I do believe one of the main reasons this is happening is because Yuzu was one of those emulators that was technically behind a paywall, but wasn't. So there's two versions of Yuzu, right? You have the standard one. You can just, you could have just looked up. You didn't even have to go to a Patreon or anything. You just look it up, download it, and it worked. And it worked pretty well. I use it. I backed up my copy of Tears of the Kingdom and played Tears of the Kingdom 60 frames a second at 1080p, sometimes 2K, but 2K was a little buggy. But regardless, I used Yuzu. I only really ever used it for Tears of the Kingdom because I was burnt down to Breath of the Wild, and it felt like I was playing Breath of the Wild, so I figured why not spice it up and play it 40 to 60 frames per second, just above what the Switch can do. But yeah, so I used Yuzu, so I got the free version. I didn't even know there was a paid version until like a couple weeks ago, but I didn't care. But yeah, so I think they were making around like 30 to 40K a month off of Patreon. So the paid version was essentially the one that would get the better updates or something like that, or the more optimized updates, shit like that, and then the free version later would, get those. So basically, if you wanted the most most optimized version of Yuzu, you would go subscribe to Patreon, which I believe was like $30. And I think that's what caught Nintendo's attention the most, was the fact that it was being sold. Like they were making really good money. Really good money off of this. And and the most unfortunate part when you talk about emulation is piracy gets brought up. And unfortunately, you can have the most diehard emulator community members argue this all they want. They can't, because they know they're wrong. Switch game piracy was at an all-time fucking high because of Yuzu. And it's not like they directly had a hand in the piracy. It's not like they were telling people to, but you had a lot of people and websites in that were let you download ROMs and that single-handedly telling you to use Yuzu. That or a couple of the other Switch emulators, but most of the time they'd be like, Yuzu is mostly the best recommended. So it was getting a lot of traction from us who gain our games the right way, but it was also getting the attention of us who don't get our games the right way and just pirate it. And by the way, I need to tell people this because this comes up constantly for some reason. Just because you own a copy of the game does not give you the right to go online and download another copy. That is still piracy. You are still stealing a copy. Okay? That's like if I were to go to fucking GameStop, right? And I were to bring in proof that I own Final Fantasy VII Remake on PS5, right? And I go in and I just demand another copy of Final Fantasy VII Remake for PS5 for free. I already own it. You should just be able to give me another one. It's literally the same thing. If you own a game and you go and pirate it, you go download it, another copy of it on the internet, you were still technically stealing it. Just because you own the game does not give you the right to download it. And that was actually from what I've seen, the thought process for majority of Yuzu users, who maybe not the vast majority, but a lot of them were just like, well, I already own the game, so morally I don't feel bad about downloading it. When it's like, no, you're still committing piracy. Like, that's still a thing. And I think Nintendo caught wind of that. Nintendo saw that and they noticed how much money they were making. So they struck them with a lawsuit. Now, Yuzu did put out a statement, and you know, it's not a bad statement or anything like that. But before I get to the statement, I do want to say that you can shit on Nintendo all you want, right? You can shit on Nintendo absolutely all you want. The problem is they have every right to do this. Yeah, it's a little shitty, but like when you look at the context at what they're coming out of with it, you know, yeah, there was a lot of piracy with Switch games. I mean, Metroid, the new Metroid game got leaked like a week before it came out. And there were so many people that pirated that leak or got that leak through illegitimate ways. I mean, the leak was an illegitimate way regardless, but you know what I mean. And started playing the game a week early using emulators. And so I think Nintendo was like, okay, we had enough of this shit. So Yuzu put out a statement saying, "Hello, Yuzers and Citra fans. We write today to inform you that Yuzu and Yuzu's support of Citra are being discontinued, effective immediately. Yuzu and its team have always been against piracy. We started the projects in good faith out of passion for Nintendo and its consoles and games, and we're not intending to cause harm. But we see now that because our projects can circumvent Nintendo's technological protection measures and allow users to play games outside of authorized hardware, they have led to extensive piracy. In particular, we have been deeply disappointed when users have used our software to leak game content prior to its release and ruin the experience for legitimate purchasers and fans. We have come to the decision that we cannot continue to allow this to occur. Piracy was never our intention, and we believe that piracy of video games and on video game consoles should end. Effective today, we will be pulling our code repositories offline, discontinuing our Patreon accounts and Discord servers, and soon shutting down our websites. We hope our actions will be a small step towards ending piracy of all creators' works. Thank you for your years of support and understanding our decision." Now, I have Yuzu here right now. I'm actually going to start it up. Editor, I'll send you later footage of this working. So, as you just heard, as well, yes, Citra itself as well has been taken down. Now, I mostly used Citra on mobile, and I went to go look at the Play Store, and soon enough, yep, Citra is no longer on the Play Store. Now, here's the fun part is whatever goes on the internet never really leaves the internet. So you could very easily find updated versions of Yuzu and Citra online very easily. These emulators are not 100% dead. I want to make that very, very, very clear. These emulators are not dead, okay? They will still function the way they were beforehand. So here I have Tears of the Kingdom. Again, I will put the footage in post, or it'll be different footage than what you're seeing. But yeah, Tears of the Kingdom is working literally just fine. So the emulators still work. Okay, you can still get them. Now, this what poses a problem, right? Is so like for emulators like Yuzu and I believe RPCS3, the PS3 emulator. I think this is how Yuzu works. I could be 1000% fucking wrong on this, but I'm pretty sure the way they did the emulators, the same way the PS3 emulator works, is instead of trying to make patches for all round games, they like try and patch the emulator for very specific games at a time or some shit like that. So like for example, when RCPCS3 was like a couple years ago, like Metal Gear Solid 4 compatibility kind of fucking sucked. It barely ran. But now, if you go look, it's actually runs much better than what it used to because they patched the emulator specifically for that game. So if you're trying to play a niche game, the support probably wasn't there. But I'm pretty sure that's how Yuzu was functioning, was they would patch the game or patch the emulator for very specific games at a time, to add more availability. So with Citra and with Yuzu being shut down, compatibility with games are stuck at where they're at. So for new Switch games that come out that may use something that Yuzu isn't used to, system and hardware wise and shit like that, you may not be able to functionally and properly emulate it anymore. We will honestly have to wait and see how this affects the future of Yuzu and Citra and how this affects the future of emulation in general. Now, back in the day when shit like this would happen, it honestly boosted the emulation scene a lot more than what people expected. It made people more driven. It made people more wanting to make emulators better. Progress. Like you can't get rid of progress. And the emulation scene has been seeing massive, massive leaps in progress for years now. Yuzu and Citra being one of them. I mean, the 3DS being a pretty not hard, but not easy system to emulate, especially if you don't have up-to-tier hardware. And with Yuzu, you kind of have to have pretty decent hardware to properly use it, especially if you are using plugins to make like games like Tears of the Kingdom run at 60 frames a second and upscale and shit, So we will have to wait and see what the future is and how these emulators will hold up without receiving any more updates. Now, one thing to be very clear. Like I said, I dump all my games. Okay. I do not pirate Nintendo games. Okay. Disclaimer. I don't pirate Nintendo games. I most of the time, especially when it comes to 3DS games, I only really play the games that I played on my 3DS that I like specifically bought and owned. Like I just recently modded my 2DS XL so that way I could, re-download all of my games through the eShop, because you can still do that through the Nintendo eShop. Like you can still download games you purchased, and then I would dump them, make them, Citra CIA ROMs, and then I just put them on my computer. So I do not suggest pirating. I do not suggest pirating, because the more we pirate, the more shit like this is gonna happen. I mean, I know Modern Vintage Gamer just released a video as of this recording like an hour ago, and he even said that there's really no need to fear about the future of emulation right now. He said that, emotions are high, but he doesn't see this as a very bad thing for the emulation scene as a whole. But this does get me a little worried for emulators like Dolphin, Wii and GameCube emulator. This gets me worried for emulation hubs like RetroHub. What the fuck is that? What the RetroArch? I'm fucking having a mental stroke. RetroArch. This makes me worry for programs like RetroArch, where it's a mass emulation hub. It's it's not just your standard, oh, you can only really play any. No, you can play any. It has compatibility with Nintendo 64, SNES, Wii, GameCube, the whole shabam. If there's an emulator for it, you can bet that RetroArch has a fucking core for it. At least anything below like PS1 or PS2 or some shit like that. I think PS2 emulation is too much for it. But regardless, yeah, so this sucks. This is a really, really sad day that Yuzu and Citra have been taken down. But like I said, whatever gets put on the internet stays on the internet. So you can probably very easily find pretty decent date-wise updated versions of Citra and Yuzu and use them just fine. Thankfully, they are not programs that need to connect to the fucking internet to function. So you are fine on that certain path. But like I said, when it comes to, future games, especially for Switch games, since, we're not making 3DS games anymore, but especially when it comes to future Switch games, compatibility, we will just have to wait and see how it is. And I hope it holds up. I really do, because, dude, I'm going to be honest, I have barely touched my Switch. I've mostly been emulating because it's just so much nicer. I don't have to deal with shitty performance, and on top of that, it's just nice to be able to play a game 2K resolution at 60 frames a second. It's really nice, depending upon the game. Tears of the Kingdom kind of shits itself, but it could just be my hardware. I don't know. I don't care. But regardless, I'll see you next time when I decide to upload something.